Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace. My name is Yusuf Ismail. I'm an attorney, a debater, and a public speaker. At least 2 years ago, I was a regular on ITV doing a program called I Beg to Differ, which focused on interactive debate on socio-political, cultural, and indeed religious issues contemporaneous to South African society. Well, as we've mentioned over the past few days, this week we do have something special in store. We will be focusing on confronting Islamophobia and some of the crucial misconceptions that exist in this world. We will be tackling a lot of these issues. We have a fantastic lineup for all of you out there. And tonight, I have someone special joining us all the way from Saudi Arabia, but originally hailing from the United States of America, the one and only Dr. Samuel Shropshire. Now, Sam Shropshire is someone that is quite dear to me. I had a significant experience. The first time I think I met him was, I believe, in 2016 when I was involved in a discussion or a debate with an Egyptian extremist by the name of Usama Dagduk. And Sam and I met for the first time and we interacted, and he's someone that touches your heart when he speaks and he communicates his message. Sam has been and had more than 30 years of experience as a founder, a CEO and a director of business, education, non-governmental organizations. He's a passionate and effective speaker. He's made countless motivational and educational presentations and speeches before government entities. He has worked successfully lobbying US Congress, the Canadian and British Parliaments, the United Nations. He has been on the foreign and state policy teams that introduced bills to the US congressional and state legislative committees. He's an avid writer and a motivator, and Shropshire has been an active leader for many years in the past in the Annapolis area in Maryland, in the state of Maryland. He was in fact even elected to the Annapolis City Council in 2005, garnering overwhelming support from both Democrats and Republicans, and is currently in the field of religious reconciliation, lecturing on environmental concerns. He's with the Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation, quite a remarkable group. And it's my privilege and pleasure to invite him to the platforms of South Africa on the various media platforms that we are operating on this week. Welcome to South Africa once again, as I'd like to call you, Uncle Sam. How do you do? Assalamu alaikum.
Thank you very much. Wa alaikum salam. I'm very happy to be back in South Africa, but I hope to be there in person as soon as possible.
Inshallah, we'd like to make that happen soon. There's been just so much happening. Presently, Uncle Sam, as you have indicated, you are based in Saudi Arabia, but you were originally from the United States, and you're now presently running the Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation. Can you probably just give us a bit of why I think it's important, the background in terms of where you hail from and what you were in fact dealing with? Because at some point in time, I do understand you were with the State Department way back in the 80s during the Bush administration.
Yes, not with the State Department, but lobbying the State Department. I would say I worked in the field of human rights and religious freedom for some 25 years, primarily in Washington and at the United Nations. But I came to Saudi Arabia in 2011 to work on a project involving Quran. I'm an ordained Christian pastor. I didn't know anything about Quran when I arrived here, but I can tell you I began learning. I was here to correct the English text in a new translation of the Quran. It was being done by Safi Kaskas, who's going to be with you later in this program. But Safi invited me here. They gave me plane ticket to come. When I got off the plane, I knew nothing. I was scared to death from everything I'd seen on American TV. I didn't know anything about Islam. I saw everything. Terrorism. And when I walked down the streets here, I was scared to death. But gradually over time, I began to realize that what I'd been taught by American news media was all a lie, it was a hoax. and that people in Saudi Arabia were just like you and me, just like in America. They were kind, they were good. It was the love of the people living in Saudi Arabia that eventually helped me to understand Islam and brought me to the conclusion that I'd been a Muslim all my life.
What triggered the transfer? As I understand, you came then in 2011. Prior to that, and certainly, I mean, you know, within the trajectory of a contemporary religio-political history, and I don't want to kind of bog the entire discussion, but within that whole trajectory, it seems that 9/11 for many Americans, and indeed for the world, was a turning point in terms of how, I mean, Islam came into the kind of public arena. I mean, prior to that, the 80s and the 70s, popular culture in the United States was by and large dominated by the communist threat. I mean, and this was evident, for example, even in the Rambo movies. You have, I recall viewing one of the Rambo movies where Sylvester Stallone fights against the Soviets, but he actually is on the side of the Mujahideen, who are actually backed by the Reagan administration. You in what capacity, I just want to, before we can go to your transition, in what capacity were you in fact lobbying various aspects within the state apparatus in terms of what the trajectory you wanted to achieve?
Well, I looked for U.S. congressmen and members of the British and Canadian parliaments who would travel with me. Let's look at Romania, for instance. In the mid-'80s, the Ceausescu family ruled over Romania. It was a dictatorship. Nicolae Ceausescu he called himself communist, but it was in all practical purposes just a dictator. We looked for places where Christians, Muslims, and Jews were having problems with their faith. There were 185 Muslims, Christians, and Jews in prison in Romania because of their faith. I took members of the U.S. Congress. You know, I wanted to meet with Ceausescu. Ceausescu family wouldn't have anything to do with me. I put an open letter in the New York Times back in 1985. It already cost $20,000 to buy that full-page ad. We listed the names of all the prisoners. It was an open letter to Nicolae Ceausescu to tell him, let our people go, let these people of faith out. So I'd already created quite a stir in Romania before I went there the first time. I took one congressman with me the first time, Mark Silgender, and then I later took 3 others, Frank Wolf, Chris Smith, and one other whose name slips me right now. But we were very powerful. As we walked around Romania, it was Tony Hall. As we walked around the streets of Romania, we were followed by radio and television inside the country. And, you know, Nicolae Ceausescu and his family would never meet with me. But if I have 3 congressmen and 2 members of the British Parliament sitting there with me, who
sure. And I just want to
ask me questions.
Go ahead. I just want to unpack at that stage, Uncle Sam. What was your denomination? Because it's quite rare in the 80s for someone to be concerned. Well, at least in that context, the rights of all religious people. Okay. What denomination were you part of?
I was Presbyterian, okay. Reformed Church, and I was the president of Christian Solidarity International, which is based in Zurich, Switzerland. I was the U.S. president. And in this capacity, I was able to approach congressmen. Now we work in the name of Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation. I am a Muslim. I have been a Muslim since I was 3 years old. I just didn't realize it until I got here. Now we're going to be approaching the U.S. Congress. We hope to build an office on Capitol Hill near the U.S. Congress. We're working on this right now. We're in the fundraising period, and we'll be living next to the U.S. Congress and lobbying Congress as well as the Senate Foreign Relations Committee.
So let's move then to 2011. You came to Saudi Arabia and you were called to look at a translation, as I understand, by Safi Kaskas. By the way, I'm looking forward to getting a copy of that translation by Dr. Safi Kaskas. I believe it's quite an impressive translation and it's very contemporaneous. But you were called to essentially look at the English text. What was it? Why did they specifically get you there to that for that very purpose?
Well, it was interesting. They wanted me to proofread. See, I was a graduate of a Christian college. I studied theology in undergraduate school. I studied at 3 different seminaries, postgraduate. And they wanted someone with Christian background to come and look at this and to proofread and to ask questions. Well, I'd never read the Quran before until I got here, but I can say within the first 6 months, I read it maybe 10 times. And so in the process, my life began to change. I've been reading about Isa, or Jesus, who was the Messiah and the Christ, as the Christians believe. I was reading that Jesus had done many miracles, including raising the dead back to life again. I was reading that he was virgin born of the Virgin Mary. Mary was exalted above all other women. I was just astounded at what I was reading in the Quran. And
what was your preconception then? Surely as a minister, because most ministers do, as I understand at divinity school, have some degree of cursory study about Islam. Were you at any stage prior to that period taught about the Quran within the ministries that you were studying within divinity school or theological school about Islam, about the Quran, about the Prophet Muhammad? Because it appears to me at Moody Bible Studies and even at Fuller Theological Seminary, most of these courses and seminaries have specific studies about Islam, but more often than not biased towards the Quran, biased towards Islam, and very critical in certain instances. So my question to you is, prior to that, what, obviously you had read it for the first time, but what was your kind of precursor? What was the impression that was given to you by those teaching you in reaching the ministry that you had eventually reached?
Well, I had Muslim friends in Romania that I had met. Many of them were in prison. I had Muslim friends in the United States. The daughter of Malcolm X is a friend of mine. I had her come and speak at Annapolis High School when I was on the city council. So in that sense, I was somewhat familiar, but I wasn't familiar with the Quran. I've never been a rabid anti-Muslim, but let me say, when 9/11 happened, that just raised the ire of all Americans.
Where were you on 9/11? Where were you on 9/11?
I was in my home watching on TV. I saw the accident, the first plane. I saw the second plane hit, and then everybody knew it was no accident. It was real. And then gradually the facts came to light. 15 Saudis were involved on 3 different planes. One of them hit the Pentagon. There was a 4th plane that crashed in Pennsylvania. But you have to look at radicalism and you have to look at terrorism.
Sure.
Not all Muslims, the Muslims I knew in America were not like that. None of them would have been involved in anything like this. In every faith today, Islam, Christianity, Judaism, in Hinduism and Buddhism, they're radical terrorists. Mm-hmm. They like to make the evening news, so they blow themselves up, or they plant bombs in different places. All of this gets CNN attention, Fox News attention. But these people are not true to their faith. These people are crazy. And if you look at Muslim terrorists in the world today, who are they killing? They're killing more Muslims than they are Christians or Jews. It's an amazing situation.
It's horrendous.
People are insane.
It's a horrendous thing. So coming back to the transition period, and then I'm going to unpack the aspects of Islamophobia and so on. So when you read the Quran, you read it about approximately, so many times, 10 times. What was the trigger there? If there was was it an evolved process where, as a leading Christian minister, you made this transition? Was it an evolutionary process, or was there a trigger which made you come to dawn and realization that, look, I have always been a submitter. I've always surrendered my will to the will of God at inception. This is what I was from inception. What was that trigger that led to that?
Well, it was my mother's teaching when I was 3 years old. My father died when I was only 3 months old. He was in a plane crash. He was a pilot. And then my mother moved my two much older brothers and sister and I back to North Georgia, small town Jefferson, and she would take us every Sunday to First Baptist Church. I, being only 3 years old at the time, 3 and 4, she would take me to, if I behaved in the church, she would say, okay, Sammy, you can go to the library and choose a book and I'll read it to you. And the book that I got many times, because I like pictures of the Holy Land, had pictures of camels and sheep and men in long white robes. She would read this book. It was called The God of Abraham. And she would tell me, she would stop in the middle of the story, Sammy, you got to listen. Look into my eyes. When you're older, you must always pray to the God of Abraham. There's only one God. I was taught that by a Christian mother. She had never heard of Islam. I'm certain she never heard of Prophet Muhammad or Quran. She didn't know anything about it. And I began, as I went to a Christian boarding school for high school, then to Shelton College, Christian undergraduate, got a degree in theology there, and then on to Faith Theological Seminary, Liberty Baptist Theological Seminary in California Graduate School of Theology. Whenever the issue of the Trinity came up, the words of the mother echoed in my ear. Sammy, there's only one God, the God of Abraham. You need to pray to the God of Abraham. So I realized as I studied Islam and I read that Islam was opposed to Trinity, I'd been opposed to Trinity all my life. I didn't know anything about it. I would ask my college professor, how can I understand Trinity? And the college professor would say, well, you know, it's like an egg. There's a shell, there's egg white, there's egg yellow, one egg. I would laugh. You mean God is like an egg? Oh, no, don't misunderstand me. When I got to college, Bob Carver told me, he said, you know, God is like a banana. You peel it, you squeeze the inside, there are 3 parts. Oh, God's like a banana. No, he's not like a banana. I'm just trying to. Finally, I got to seminary and I asked my professor in seminary, I said, can you explain the Trinity to me in very simple terms? He said, it's a mystery. It can't be explained.
Yeah, it's amazing.
For the first time, somebody told me the straight truth. That's besides my mother. So I was invited not just to proofread the English text and to look for possible ways of explaining a matter better, but I was also invited to cross-reference the Quran with the Bible. This had never been done before. So I added more than 1,000 footnotes at the bottom of each page throughout the Quran, 1,000 footnotes, and wherever the words grace and mercy were mentioned, I would show where it's mentioned in the Old Testament or New Testament. I would show where specific individuals were mentioned, Abraham, Noah, Moses. I would show where they're mentioned in the Old Testament. I would give Old Testament references. It was an incredible opportunity. By the time I finished this, 3-year project. It was like getting a PhD in Islamic studies. I don't have a diploma, but I've got that Quran, and I hope you get a copy soon. It can be ordered off.
I hope to get it. And that's a translation by Safi Kaskas. That's the one that you,
yes, it is.
You've spoken highly of.
Job.
Yeah, I'd like to have a look at that particular translation. I don't think it's too widely available in South Africa, but I'd certainly like to get a copy and probably make it available to.
It can be ordered off the internet, and just search Kaskas Quran. You'll find places where it's sold.
So coming back to the idea then, and what I find amazing, because we discussed and touched about this yesterday, is that you found the difficulty in reconciling the idea of the Trinity. And so you essentially had, when you came across the Quran, a confirmation of what you already were, more than anything else, as opposed to simply taking a corrective approach, but it confirmed what you had always been and just simply put you back to say, look, here's the opening in terms of identifying what your position of submitting to the will of the one and only God is.
Yeah, let me say that probably 80 million Americans were taught this when they were in Sunday school, vacation Bible school. When they were very young, they were taught about the God of Abraham, but they don't know what is Islam. And it's up to us to explain that to them, one, verbally, but also through our behavior, through reflecting the behavior of Prophet Muhammad. Studying his life totally changed me. It was an amazing situation. Prophet Muhammad, he was he was a human rights activist according to the Medina Declaration. He was a civil rights activist according to his last sermon. A white's not better than a black. He said all races are equal. He was an animal rights activist. We know the story of the crying camel. He found a camel. Literally, I've seen camels here in Saudi Arabia. They cry. Tears run down their eyes. And he found a crying camel in a marketplace. It was overburdened with too heavy a load, and it was malnourished. It hadn't been fed properly. It hadn't been watered properly. He said, "Who's the owner of this camel?" And the owner finally came up and said, "Please forgive me, Prophet. I won't do it again." And we know the story of the woman, a prostitute, who dipped her shoe in the water and gave a drink to a dog. He said, she's going to be in Jannah. She's going to be in heaven. This is Prophet Muhammad. He was not only an animal rights activist, he was a women's rights activist. Women had equal opportunity in every field of life. He was anti-war, not pro-war. He was against war. He didn't want people to fight, but he said, if someone attacks you, you have a right to defend yourself. 3 years ago, before the pandemic started, I took a group of Muslim youth, young adults, to Japan. We went to the city of Hiroshima, where the first atomic bomb was dropped by America. That bomb killed immediately 70,000 people, and another 70,000 died over the next 6 months. That bomb wiped out all plants, all animals within the city of Hiroshima were killed. It destroyed religious buildings. All of that is against the law, according to Islam. And innocent people died. Children, babies. We knelt and prayed at ground zero that God would help us as Muslims to end weapons of mass destruction. The news media was coming to us afterwards. They were there making videos and interviewing us, and they said, and they were laughing. They said, Muslims against war? You've got to be kidding. Every day we see it on television. They said, yes. What happened here in this city is illegal. can't destroy crops and animals. You can't just kill innocent people. You can't destroy religious buildings. And you can't fight a war like this. This is inhuman. They learned a lot. Do you realize that today, Islam is the fastest growing faith in Japan?
Wow. Amazing. So it's certainly amazing. And this takes me to this whole notion then that we are now constantly faced with this neologism of, which I've mentioned, in introducing these programs, of Islamophobia, the kind of inherent fear of Islam. The various dictionary definitions give the idea of a particularly intense dislike or fear of Islam as a political force, some sort of hostility or prejudice towards Muslims. Now, you've seen both sides of the world. I mean, you represent both, if I can call it in loose terms, the West and the East. You've seen both. Can you explain the psychology behind this? Because when you talk about radicalism and radical movements, it's a fairly recent phenomenon within the Muslim world, vis-a-vis the Western world in the latter part of the 20th century. But can you explain this intense aversion towards anything Islamic within the mainstream media and, of course, within popular literature, which has attained more and more currency today as the days go by, even in the context of the pandemic? We enmeshed in the pandemic, but I mean, there was a time at the beginning of this pandemic where in India, the Indian government were blaming the Muslims for the spread of COVID, and then many other aspects around this particular issue. I want you to explain to us probably what you believe is a psychology that is driving this degree and level of hatred and antagonism that we see around us.
I think it's a fear of the unknown. The fear, we're all afraid of something we don't understand. And we need to, for every terrorist act committed, we Muslims need to be out there doing 1,000 good works to overcome that one terrorist act. We need to be behaving like the Prophet Muhammad, doing good things. This is our objective through Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation, to mirror the behavior of the Prophet Muhammad, to let the world know who he was, because he was very much like Jesus Christ. He said, you can't do for yourself what you don't want done to your neighbor, or you don't want done to yourself what you don't want done for your neighbor. He said, you've got to treat others with great respect. You have to. Islam teaches people to behave as Jesus would behave. Yeah. As all the prophets would behave. And as we look at their lives and began to understand, there isn't a huge difference in what's being taught today in various faiths. We hope that we can communicate this throughout the world wherever we go. Our goal right now is to open an Islamic center. There are several Islamic centers. There are maybe over 25 around the Washington, D.C. area, in Virginia, in northern Virginia, and in Maryland. There are several mosques in Washington, D.C., but there is no Islamic center on Capitol Hill next to the U.S. Congress. And that's our goal over the next year, to get this, get the ball going, to raise the funds to build an Islamic center. And we will have a meeting hall inviting people in from Congress. We'll have sleeping apartments that we can rent out to congressional aides. This will be a place of education. It'll be a place of meeting. People can come and have meals. We'll have exhibits there about Islam. And we'll have speakers like you showing up to talk about Islam. We're excited about the future. We've just come back from traveling 4 months. We visited 28 U.S. states, driving from state to state to state, speaking 3 or 4 times a day, we realized that many Americans didn't understand what we were doing. They didn't know anything about Muslim Voice for Peace. We met with just about every major Christian leader in the United States, every Muslim leader. We met with every Muslim organization. We held appointments, 3 or 4 appointments a day for 4 months. When we finished that, I was quite heavy when we left for this trip. I lost 30 kilos during this 4-month trip. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. I have a greater understanding of Islam in the United States, and I have great enthusiasm to keep going and to make this vision come true.
That's a Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation. That's the organization that you're based on. And I do believe there are other like-minded organizations in the States. What are some of the challenges? For example, one prominent organization was CARE, the Council of American Islamic Relations. I believe at some point in time run by Ibrahim Hooper. There are, however, unlike your group, which is fairly new, a lot of these organizations that are combating Islamophobia within the United States are being viewed in a negative light. For example, I believe the Anti-Defamation League and many other organizations have targeted these particular groups as being linked to Hamas or being somewhat affiliated to extremist factions and so on. I mean, the general kind of slanderous attacks that you get from Fox News and so on. How would you combat that? How would you combat that constant refrain of labeling, even though you want to go and break down the chasm of misunderstanding that's existing?
By telling the truth, by speaking truth to power. You know, I worked in Washington for 25 years. I targeted the Senate Foreign Relations Committee and the House Committee on Foreign Affairs. We worked with the State Department. We worked with United Nations in New York. We worked at the White House with the when Reagan and Bush administrations. People listened to what we had to say. Now I want to do it in the name of Islam. I have 4 young people who will be moving to Washington with me: Asa al-Hajj Hussein, Kutaiba al-Malki, and Asa's brother Taj Hussein is going with us. And I'm going to be training them along with a number of American Muslim young adults on how to lobby Congress, State Department, and United Nations.
Well, why is it that it's 2021, 2022, going to 2022 now, that almost now probably 60 years later, and people like you should be supported to the hilt with what you're doing in terms of lobbying. And yet we find that in this time and age, the Jewish lobby, the Zionist lobby, is still so powerful in terms of dictating policy, to the extent that at every single electioneering campaign, if you're a Democrat or you're a Republican, it is a compulsory, it's like a compunction out there for the presidential elect to go and attend and speak to the American-Israeli Public Affairs Committee. We as Muslims, I believe, I have now exceeded the Jewish population in the United States, and yet still do not see the struggle of organizations and groups like yours, which should be supported, and other like-minded groups, in presenting an effective bulwark to the Zionist influence in the United States, which is behind a lot of the Islamophobia that you see. A lot of the Zionist organizations, the Daniel Horowitz Foundation and so on, they pump out the negativity towards Islam. And your groups and others like you would provide an effective counterbalance to that. We don't see the support for that.
Well, that's one reason why we visited the United States and went to these 28 states, was to contact Muslim leaders, let them know who we are, and to build a significant donor base within the United States. We have to have this. We can't survive without it. We're working on this. It's going to come true, and we're excited. But, you're absolutely right about the Israeli lobby. It's very strong. Many congressmen feel they can't get elected without the support of AIPAC, American Israeli Lobby. But this is
there a fear? Is there a fear, Uncle Sam? What's a fear? What is the fear? Because if they've got the money, they've got the capital, but they're in a minority. So what is the fear that if they don't support the state of Israel, do not address AIPAC, don't veer to
major problem isn't AIPAC. Now we have Jewish Voice for Peace standing up. They've got they have hundreds of thousands of supporters throughout the United States. We work, Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation. We're closely aligned with Jewish Voice for Peace on different pieces of legislation affecting Palestine and the state of Israel. Many Jews in the United States are supporting the Palestinians. They see the injustices that U.S. has been supporting. But the major problem isn't AIPAC. The major problem is evangelical conservative Christians who are supporting the state of Israel and telling people that these are God's chosen people. Well, God has chosen you, and he's chosen me as well. We're God's chosen people, people of faith. And we need to stand up and speak out. God brought a number of people to Saudi Arabia to train them and to help them overcome difficulties in their lives. Abraham came here. He was having marital problems. God told him to take Hajar and go to Mecca, and that God would bless Abraham and Ishmael, his son, and he would multiply the seed of Abraham greater than the stars in the sky and the sands on the beach. And this is happening. Now we see also that God brought Musa. He killed someone in Israel and in Egypt. He was running from Pharaoh. And God told Musa to go to Midian, which is Arabia. God blessed Musa here for 10 years. Then Musa was told by Allah, by God, go back and speak truth to power in Egypt. And he did. And God blessed Musa and his descendants. Now, I'm certainly not like Musa. I'm not like Ibrahim. I'm just a sinner who God cleaned up through Ar-Rahman, Elohim, God the most merciful. When I learned those two words, my life changed drastically. I found out I could go to Allah, I could go to God directly and confess my sins. And I found out that he was merciful. He would forgive me my sins. Oh, that was one of the greatest days of my life. Now I've been here 10 years, like Musa was here for 10 years. I've been here 10 years. Now I feel very strongly that Allah is telling me to go back to America and speak truth to power. And I'm taking a small contingent, small army with me, 4 or 5 brothers from here, and we'll pick up others from the United States. We'll move to Washington, D.C., be a part of our Center for Reconciliation, and we'll be working on Capitol Hill, emanating the proper behavior of the Prophet Muhammad, proving to the world that he was a human rights activist, civil rights activist, women's rights activist, animal rights activist, and that he was anti-war. We will be a major leader in the fight against nuclear weapons.
Alhamdulillah. One of the questions people may want to know is the MVPR. What methodology is employed? What are some of the projects? I do understand about going from place to place in speaking and engaging in different individuals, but what are some of the other projects that you have in plan to achieve these particular objectives?
Well, we're the word dawa, who is frowned upon in many societies today, but it simply means calling people to faith. We're calling people to faith. We have two means of calling. One, we call non-believers to understand who is God, who is Allah, and why Allah cares about them. We read in the Quran and the Old Testament of the Bible, God says, "Call unto me and I will answer you." We want people to call to God, non-believers. But as I've traveled all over the world, I find out that Muslims today, I think 1.7 million Muslims in the world today. Wow, that's a lot of Muslims. But how many of them truly are people of faith? How many of them attend the 5 daily prayers? How many of them truly believe? It's like Christians, only, they say 60% of Christian youth today want nothing to do with organized religion. It's the same with Jews. And more it's the same with Muslim youth. It's true. I find them everywhere. And I was recently speaking in Norway before the pandemic. And I was speaking at the Oslo Islamic Center. And I needed a break. I told the imam, I said, I need to go out and get some fresh air. So I walked about a block down the street and I see a young man leaning. He was leaning against the wall. I got closer. He's got needle tracks going up and down his arm. I said, "Looks like you're having a pretty bad time." And he started crying. He said, "Yes, I need help." I reached out and shook his hand. I said, "What's your name?" He said, my name is Mohammed. You see, Muslim youth living in the West, they watch TV too. Whether it's in Germany, Norway, Japan, where they've grown up, they watch TV. And on TV, they see Muslim killing Muslim. Shaitan is whispering in their ears. He's laughing. Shaitan. And they're beginning to believe this is Islam. We need to reach them as well throughout the United States. And here in Saudi Arabia, Ace and I work at Bremen prison. I go there. There are hundreds of Saudi youth in prison for drugs and alcohol. It isn't enough to call non-believers to faith when many people from our own faith are jumping off the straight path. Absolutely. We have to effectively call them back, and we have to give them drug rehabilitation programs. We have to help them get help. I have young people throughout the United States coming to me saying, where can I go to get help for drugs and alcohol? And then I asked the imam, are there any AA programs or NA programs and Narcotics Anonymous programs here in the mosque? He said, no. The young people are telling me I can go down the street to a church and get help. That's no. If Prophet Muhammad were here today, God, peace and blessings be upon him, we would see his behavior in this issue. And he would be compassionately calling young people back to the straight path. We need to do this. This is also an important part of Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation.
Sure. That's extremely moving to me, just listening to you speak, Uncle Sam. I just want to bring some. I believe we do have a noted guest on our platform. I believe it is Muhammad Kuvadia, attorney Muhammad Kuvadia, that is on this platform and would probably like to join us and also interact with you, Uncle Sam. He's also involved in the field of dawah, based in Johannesburg, and we're wondering if he's there. Brother Muhammad, are you there?
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Can you hear me, Yusuf?
Yeah, walaikum salam, Muhammad. It's good to have you on our program. Welcome.
Thank you for having me this evening, and it's quite honored to be with Sam this evening on your show.
Alhamdulillah. Any questions? You are more than free to engage our guest speaker, Brother Muhammad.
Assalamu alaikum, Sam. How are you doing?
Walaikum salam.
It's nice to hear your passionate plea to us, and it reminds us how fortunate some of us actually are, having been brought up in the environment of Islam. And when we see the effort that a lot of other people have made just to be in this beautiful religion, there's a beautiful hadith by our Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam that says, "La yu'minu ahadukum hatta yuhibbu li akhihi ma yuhibbu li nafsihi." That none of you will truly believe until he wishes for his brother that which he wishes for himself. And you have now seen and appreciated the value of Islam that it is in your life and what it has brought. And it's very emotional to see you, relate your story. And like this, we have an obligation and a responsibility as Muslims. And the topic at hand today is Islamophobia. And I think, the most important thing sometimes that we need to remember is that a phobia in itself is an overwhelming and unreasonable fear. And to allay this fear, we have an effort, and we have work, and we have a struggle. And that struggle is education and dawah. We need to teach people. If the fear of the unknown is something that's innate to every human being. And as long as we can go out and reach out to people and explain to them the beauty of Islam and the simplicity of Islam, you'll find that the awareness of Islam continues to grow. Now, you're living in an Islamic environment, but you know that in a Christian environment, the knowledge of Islam is lacking. And you know for a fact that we have not done our job. As much as we have today social media and we have all these various platforms, I feel that more needs to get done to get the message of Islam across. And, to allay the fears of Islamophobia, because in itself, there is an irrational fear, and it creates anxiety in a community whenever Islam or something relating to Muslim is actually taking place. So unnecessarily, you're finding that there is an anxiety that should not have been there in the first place. So, Jazakallah for the passionate the introduction that you've given us about your background. I've heard about you, and it's a great opportunity for you to see you. And I'm grateful that, you're continuing to do the work of da'wah, and you want to extend the message out to people in a way that people can begin to appreciate and realize that there's nothing foreign about Islam. It's one of the Abrahamic faiths, but at the same time, it's the most complete faith you'll ever find on the face of this earth. Mm-hmm. So, from my side, I really appreciate, your input and your advices to us, and I'll take it to heart. And I just, implore, would use this opportunity to people to use our platforms today to further the cause of Islam. Islam will continue to grow with or without our assistance. That is inevitable, But the reality of the situation is we just need to make an effort out there so that we can find that, like yourself, there are millions of people that are searching for the truth. There are millions of people that need assistance. And if we as Muslims cannot provide that particular platform for them, then I feel at the same time we are lacking and we have not fulfilled our mandate as Muslims in our community. Yusuf?
Jazakallah. Now, thank you for that, Muhammad. I think that is quite crucial. Uncle Sam, any response or comments you'd like to make in relation to that? That was Brother Attorney Muhammad Kuvadia.
I just agree with you wholeheartedly, brother. It's more important how we behave than what we say.
Yeah.
It's our behavior that's going to bring people to Islam. It's our involvement in marching and protesting against nuclear weapons. in supporting the environment. You know, I have a brother in Australia, an imam, an Egyptian imam living in Australia. And when the great fires were breaking out across southern Australia, he went and he started rescuing koala bears.
Mm.
Many environmentalists have come to Islam through the behavior of that imam. It's our work on behalf of civil rights and human rights. When they see the Muslims lined up for these causes, it's going to bring people to Islam. It's our work in giving food to the hungry. I was in Wales. Wales there's a county in England called Shropshire. That's where my ancestors come from. They came to America in 1645, Joseph Shropshire. And I wanted to see Shropshire, so I went there, and then I discovered that's where I met Abdurrahim Green, who's a famous Daya in England. I've been in his house several times and meeting with him, a great brother. But then I met another brother. He said, you need to go to Wales. So I went to Wales. When we're walking down the street of Cardiff, one of the major cities there, I saw a Christian church, same denomination that I attended before I became Muslim. And I walked over and alhamdulillah, I knocked on the door, and to my surprise, 5 ladies in hijab came to the door, and they were meeting there with other members of this local church, and they were packing food to distribute on the streets. Many people living on the streets are coming to Islam in England through the work of this group. We just need to be faithful to our calling, to what God has taught us to do, and it's our behavior, our example, that's going to bring people to Islam.
Yeah, well said, Uncle Sam. I think what you've mentioned, what Brother Muhammad also alluded to, is that from the Islamic parlance, you've got, for example, certain words. There's terminologies. You've got things like jihad, ijma, qiyas, and ibadah. And when we, for example, look at a term like ibadah, which is understood as conventionally worship, and when you ask someone what is ibadah, he'll tell you, well, it's your 5 daily salah. But the ibadah is also, the worship is also what happens to you as a Muslim when you leave your house, going to the masajid, and you find yourself in an environment where there's poverty, there's degradation, there's deprivation, there's environmental pollution, and you just simply go to the masajid, you make your salah, you go back home, or you go back to your work, and you do nothing about anything that's around you. And the point being made, and I think you've articulated it phenomenally, is that part of the spiritual quest in Islam is to concern yourself with regards to the environment. Part of the spiritual quest is to confront the injustices that you see that's happening in society, and thereby exemplifying the true ethical paradigm of the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ in terms of how he was as described as being the walking Quran. That is, in fact, what the Sunnah really is. And it seems to me that a lot of us, for example, Uncle Sam, we focus on and maybe you may want to comment, and Brother Muhammad could comment. We focus on the inherent literalism, going for the letter of the law, and you're forgetting the spirit. And as many of the Jews in the time of Jesus, the Pharisees and the Sadducees did that, he condemned their formalism. They were very formalistic, very religiously. There was an excessive amount of religiosity amongst the Pharisees, but that religiosity never found its exemplification in terms of what they did, in terms of living a balanced, harmonious, good, kind, decent human beings. It never practically fell down. And I think as Muslims, we need to sometimes do that, because we ourselves, and I speak for myself, are guilty of this kind of challenges. How do we become better people? How do we become better people to each other? In terms of how we communicate, in terms of how we behave, in how we become ethical exemplifications of the Quran, just simply then, as opposed to just literally looking at the outer parameters without understanding the very essence of what it means to be a Muslim in the 21st century.
Alhamdulillah. Yeah, you're absolutely right, Yusuf. And there are a lot of things that need to change. If we want to see the change, we look for change in the world, but we need to be the change that we want to see. We need to exemplify it. I'm very grateful to Safi Kaskas, whom you're going to be interviewing in this series. Safi was the change I needed to see in my own life. He brought me here. He took care of me. And when after being here for a couple of weeks, I needed food. He said, there's a supermarket. I asked him, I said, can your driver take me to the supermarket? He said, well, he took me to the window and he pointed down the street. He says, you can buy food there. But I said, how am I going to get there? I said, somebody's going to kidnap me or they're going to do worse. And he laughed and he said, no. I said, you're going to be awfully hungry here if you don't help yourself. So walk down the street. Every time somebody passed me, I'd turn around and look over my shoulder to make sure he wasn't pulling out a knife to cut my throat. People started coming up to me on the street and they said, where are you from? Because I'm whiter than most Saudis. And I would say nervously, I'm from United States. And they would reach out and hug me. And they would invite me into their homes for dinner. Complete stranger, just because I was an American. After being here for 6 months, I walked down the street. I heard Azan, Maghrib prayer time, and I walked down the street to the mosque. I knew I couldn't go to Mecca or Medina as a Christian because they need all the space for Muslims. And I didn't want to cause a problem. I didn't know if I could go in a mosque or if maybe certain mosque wouldn't accept me as a Christian pastor. Finally, I got up the courage and I just walked down the street, knocked on the door. I didn't know I could open the door and walk in. And Shafiq Zubir, the Muadhin, came to the door. He's a Burmese Rohingya Muslim. And he's the Muadhin at the mosque, call her to prayer. He said, may I help you? And I said, yes, I'm a Christian from the United States. Is it okay if I come inside the mosque? And Shafiq reached out and hugged me. And he said, Ahlan wa sahlan, welcome. I went inside for 3 days. I sat in the back of the prayer hall and I just watched. I didn't understand the Arabic. I didn't understand the motions of standing, bowing, kneeling, putting face to the floor, sujood. I didn't understand. After 3 days, I said to Shafiq, can you teach me to pray like a Muslim? And he said, yeah. And he taught me to pray Al-Fatiha. That's the first 8 verses of the Quran. Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen, Ar-Rahman, my life changed. Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. As I said earlier, God, the most merciful, the one who freely distributes forgiveness. Wow. I was just memorizing sounds, and I would compare these sounds with Safi Kaskas' translation of the Quran. That's where I began to understand Ar-Rahman, Ar-Rahim. And I found more grace and more mercy within the Muslims than I ever realized amongst Christians. I'm so grateful for the things that I've learned here in this country. And I'm at the heart of Islam. Nobody's covering up anything for me. What I feel bad about is that many Muslim youth, especially young adults, seem to be departing from the faith and are being called away. I ask Muslim youth everywhere I go. I speak to youth groups. I said, who is your chief enemy? And they all know the answer to that. It's Shaitan, it's Satan. He swore to Allah that he would take all of us, all the believers, into hell with him. But we have God to protect us. And if we trust in him with all of our hearts, he will protect us from the wiles of Satan. And he will help us to stay on the straight path. Shaitan, when we fall down on the straight path or we fall off the path, Shaitan wants us to believe, well, God can never forgive you for that. All I can say is that the Quran says, never despair of the mercies of Allah. It reminds me of a song I used to sing when I was a kid, teenager, as a Christian. The steadfast love of the Lord never ceases. His mercies never come to an end. They are great every morning, new every morning. Great is thy faithfulness, O Lord. Great is thy faithfulness. This is Islam. I've learned so much about the grace and mercy of Allah. And much of it has been exemplified to me by other Muslims who've come in contact with me and who've treated me with great love and respect. I'm very grateful. I'm grateful for having been in South Africa on 3 different occasions with you. But we have so much work to do.
Sure. I want to add one more point before we're going to wrap up soon. Women, it's such a topical issue, and of course the rights of women, and women are, given a bad light in the press in terms of Muslim women, particularly, as being oppressed and so on. How women Muslim women can be part of your initiative and your efforts and your organization in terms of engaging the effort?
Question. Thank you for asking. We need sisters involved with Muslim Voice for Peace and Reconciliation. They can go to our website, mvpr.org. We're a 501c3 nonprofit agency. We're very active now in the US and Canada, and now spreading in Australia and Pakistan and other countries. We need the help of sisters. My wife called me from Slovakia once, and she says, all I see are men in your pictures. That's because many women in Saudi Arabia feel that they can't have their picture made or something like this. We need women to be active. We need them on the streets with us, protesting nuclear weapons. We need them leading the charge in many areas. So please contact us and tell us, I want to volunteer. We'll begin to get you involved. And pray for us. Pray for Asa. I call him Jesus. Pray for Jesus.
We'll certainly do that.
And Taj, his brother. Pray for Kuteba. Pray for others who are involved with us, that will all stand in great love and honor, representing Allah, but also representing Prophet Muhammad and Jesus, the Messiah, and many other prophets. Oh, this is exciting. When we were able to reach congressmen and senators and governors and staff at the United Nations, when they began to understand who was Prophet Muhammad, people's lives are being changed. They think, they used to think, well, he was just a warrior. He was a hater. He carried a sword. He tried to force people to be Muslim by the sword. No. Remember when the prophet approached, he was running from his enemies in Mecca. He was running toward Taif. He was climbing the mountain to Taif. He got to the top, and some religious, so-called religious people, or they weren't even religious at all, they were worshiping idols. They came out by the numbers and they had their children. There were stacks of rocks piled up everywhere, and they had the children throwing rocks at the prophet and cursing him and swearing at him. Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him, he never picked up a rock and threw it back. And when he was cursed, he never cursed anyone in return. When his neighbor was dumping garbage across the fence into his yard, he didn't pick it up and throw it back across the fence. He was demonstrating the love of Allah for humankind. And I love the Prophet Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. He's knowing about him and studying his life has changed my life.
Alhamdulillah. Alhamdulillah. Brother Muhammad, I believe we still have Brother Muhammad there. We're going to wrap up. Any parting comments and remarks that you would like to make, Brother Muhammad, to Uncle Sam? And then I'll give Sam the final words.
I've heard about Brother Sam, and obviously to interact with him on a personal level, I'm impressed with the background and what he has to offer to us as Muslims. We can assist each other in different parts of the world. We need to work together. I've heard and there's some lessons to be taken from him. I think it's important also to bring in the facet of women and how to empower women. Remember, Islam actually took the status of women and equated that to men. And in Christendom, you had what was called the Levite marriages, because the women were the property of the husbands. And when they had passed on, you found that the second brother had to marry. They were forced to be into forced marriages. But Islam came, and Islam actually separated itself from those types of ideologies. Islam came, and a woman, her rights need to be protected. And she has walis, and a wali makes sure that her rights are protected. So alhamdulillah, I think, this opportunity that we have tonight is lessons for everybody. I believe over the next few days, there will be more programs of this particular nature. And we'd like to be part and parcel of this, even just as an audience, and begin to appreciate some of the sensitivities from the other da'is in other parts of the world. And alhamdulillah, you have a broad spectrum of speakers. So I'm going to be quite glued to your show for the next few days, inshallah.
Alhamdulillah.
Jazakallah for that, Muhammad. Jazakallah for that. And Uncle Sam, give us one message. We as South Africans, our position has been, in dire straits over the past 2 years. Besides the lockdown and the COVID, we've had, a lot of tragedies that you've probably seen in the news in KZN. Give us a message, your message to the South Africans on the airwaves of these platforms. What's your parting message to us?
I know that South Africa has suffered a lot because of this pandemic. I've been studying a lot about signs of, Jesus sat down with his disciples, his Sahaba, and he surprised them. He said, I'm going to leave. I'm going away, but I will return. And the Sahaba said, well, what will be the signs of your return? He said, there will be wars and rumors of war. There will be pestilence and disease like the world has never seen. And he said, the love of many will wax cold. They will start leaving the faith. 60% of Christian youth today say they want nothing to do with organized religion. It's the same percentages with Jewish youth. And I'm afraid it's going to be the same percentages of Muslim youth. It said the situation will become so bad. And this is confirmed in the Hadith and the Sunnah as well, that children will be rebellious against their parents, and they'll rise up and testify against their parents publicly and condemn them. Oh, God, help us. Just protect our families in the midst of all of this. The number one religion today is not Judaism, it's not Christianity, it's not Islam, it's not Hinduism or Buddhism. The number one religion in the world today is materialism. And people are worshiping in shopping malls, not in mosques or churches or synagogues or temples. They go to the shopping mall on a regular basis and they say, oh, if I could just have this, I would be happy. The Quran is in many places, reminds us that all of this is temporal. It's an illusion. And what is to come is eternal. Asa put it this way. Jesus told his disciples, don't lay up for yourselves treasures on earth where moth destroy and thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven. These are the commandments of Islam as well. Do good works. Show that you're a Muslim through your good works. The good works are not going to bring you salvation, but you'll be rewarded for them later. Our salvation comes by faith in Allah and by obedience to Him. And good works, that's part of our obedience. That's what we're doing as we're walking down the straight path. We're looking for people who are hungry. We want to feed them. We're looking for people who have no place to sleep, no housing. We try to organize our states and our societies in a way that we can provide them housing when they can't provide it for themselves. We look for people who are unemployed and we try to employ them. And we look for people who are suffering because of weapons of mass destruction or because of hatred and Islamophobia. And we try to protect them. May God help us and keep us faithful. May He protect us as we walk down the straight path. May we be faithful to Him. May our families be protected as we seek to serve Him and serve our neighbors.
Amen. Thank you for that. Jazakallah khair, Uncle Sam. It's been very moving, and it's been an absolute privilege and a joy listening to you. You always have this ability of touching my heart, and I believe you've touched the hearts of a lot of us out there, including that of the viewers. We hope to have more engagements and sessions with you as we learn through your experiences, and certainly in you being able to share some of your knowledge with us. And we want to thank also our other guest, Brother Muhammad Kuvadi, who has joined us and assisted us in interacting with Uncle Sam Shropshire. Sam has been very dear to me. He's met me for the first time. We met each other in 2017, and I've maintained a cordial, fantastic relationship with this humble human being and humble soul. And so that's the end of the show today. We will be tackling more of such issues. We do have a fantastic lineup with a whole range of scholars over the next few days. And until then, this is Yusuf Ismail. Assalamu alaikum and greetings of peace.